Hey, Pretty Girl Club. So today I'm going to talk about why the natural hair movement failed. Have you ever noticed how in the mid 2000s to 2010s there was this really big natural hair movement? People were rocking their 4C curls and doing lots of wash and goes and things like that. Well, I believe that the natural hair movement actually failed because I've noticed that now there's more of a popularity in wigs and how to make your wig look like your natural hair and where people are buying their wigs from and stuff like that. And I feel like part of the reason the natural hair movement failed was because it was never really a natural hair movement at all. The entire natural hair movement was centered around how to make your hair look as loose as possible, how to make it look as curly as possible, how to make it go from kinky and matted and quote unquote nappy to using twist outs and braid outs and blow drying it and stretching it and doing all of these things to make it appear as close to type 3 hair textures as possible. This was the trend when the natural hair movement was gaining popularity in the 2010s, and I noticed this from the very beginning. Girls were doing lots of things like slicking down their edges, trying to make their hair look as flat as possible, using all types of concoctions and homemade remedies so that your hair could be as shiny and as wavy and as curly and as laid down as possible. Even that phrase that they use, that slang term, oh, your hair is laid. Well, what does that mean? It means that it's not sticking straight up like an afro. Your hair is laid. And people say that still to this day as a compliment. So I believe that part of the reason the natural hair movement failed was because wigs became more accessible, they became more affordable. And so if you could just purchase that exact hair texture that you were trying to get your natural hair to look like, if you could just purchase it for like $15, then there's no need to spend 3 hours doing all of these deep conditioners and braid outs and twist outs and stuff like that, because now you have hair that looks like your natural hair, but you've just glued it onto your scalp. So I've noticed that ever since this happened, now there are a lot of people in the Black community saying that the 3C girls or the girls with type 3 hair got all of the brand deals and all the clicks when it came to being a natural hair influencer. And if that is the case, I can see why, because those women who naturally have that hair texture, even the brands themselves know, okay, this is the hair texture that everyone's trying to get. So why not hire influencers who already have that hair texture and they were born with it to advertise these products that can make your hair look more like the girl in the advertisement? It's no different from those Just For Me perm boxes that you used to see when you were a little girl, and like there's a picture of a black girl on there and her hair is silky straight. It's no different than that. That's all they were doing with the natural hair products. And so now I see a lot of unambiguous women who they want to claim that women with type 3 hair are erasing them when, once again, they were erasing themselves. They were erasing their own 4C hair textures by attempting to manipulate it and make it look as loose as possible without the use of chemicals. So yes, if natural hair companies see you stretching your hair out with blow dryers and then trying to twist it and do all of these different things to it to get it to appear more laid, and if they see you slicking down your edges to make it look like you have edges that are naturally silky, then they're going to play into that and try to sell you products based off of that. So my theory is that the natural hair movement, it was not about embracing your natural curl pattern. It was the curl pattern loosening movement, because we all know that in the mid 2010s, women in general were still very male centered and still very concerned about the male gaze. And this is when when Black women in particular, were still very much centered around the Black male gaze. And so we all know that the Black male preference tends to be more like us, like Exoticals or whatever. And so I feel like the real natural hair movement was about trying to make your hair look desirable to a Black male. I felt like it was all about growing your hair as long as possible, making it look as silky as possible, and making your curls look as loose as possible so you can have that long, silky, quote unquote, good hair, and it's real. I always felt that way about the natural hair movement. I felt like it was centered around that, and it was centered around looking good for men. And so then with the rise of wigs or whatever, you could do that same thing and kind of fool a man and get his attention for only $20. And I think that that is the real reason that the natural hair movement failed. And another reason I think the natural hair movement failed is because once it started to die down in popularity, you see a rise of these I hate my 4C hair YouTube videos. And you didn't see that before. I didn't see women going online and saying they hated their 4C hair. Why? because it was relaxed. It's because relaxers were popular before that. And so even with the natural hair movement, it actually wasn't about natural hair because it wasn't about embracing 4C hair in its natural texture. It was about trying to get 4C hair to look more like 3C hair. And by using whatever means necessary to get it to look that way. Usually it was via stretching and doing all of these different things like blow drying it out and putting the gel on it to make it look more silky and shiny. You know, the standard for curly hair, the beauty standard for curly hair tends to be more silky looking, more shiny looking, and like I said, looking laid. Like when people say, oh, your edges are laid as a compliment, they're obviously saying that because they're saying that they are literally laid down on your head. And notice how even to this day, if a woman's edges are like quote unquote nappy or they're like sticking up from all over her head, then it is considered not done. Her hair is considered not done. And also notice how even the natural hair movement gurus or like girls who did wear their natural hair in the Black community, whenever they had a special event, like let's say they had a wedding or a birthday party or something, they would still do everything in their power to loosen their hair texture as much as possible and get it to look more like a type 3A curl pattern or a 3B or 3C or anything other than 4C. If you look at a lot of the wash and go videos, the most popular wash and go videos did tend to be the type 3 wash and go hair videos. And so a lot of the girls who had 4C hair, because they knew that they couldn't wash and go to get that 3C look, they would try to stretch it via blow dryers and then do twist outs or whatever, or braid outs to try to get as similar of a look as possible. But then, once again, unambiguous women who have 4C hair, they were shooting themselves in the foot because you're not admitting that you actually wanted to have a different hair texture. And so then, you know, women who are born with that hair texture, type 3 or like looser curls or whatever, they're naturally going to get pushed to the forefront because you yourself are pushing them to the forefront by trying to attain that phenotype. So whether you're doing it naturally, whether you're doing it via wigs or whatever, you're still pushing that beauty narrative. And I think that the only way that a woman can move up in the beauty hierarchy, I would say if your goal is to like make your natural look the new beauty standard, which is clearly the goal of the Black women empowerment space, then the only way to possibly do that is, yeah, you would have to embrace your natural beauty. So yes, that would include, if you have 4C hair, wearing it in its 4C texture without trying to manipulate it or whatever, because the natural hair movement, I mean, you literally had girls ripping out their edges when they're wearing their real hair. No wigs, no weaves, nothing. But they were still ripping out their edges and over manipulating their hair via all of these different twist outs and stuff like that because they were still trying to attain a looser curl pattern. And then I noticed that even type 4A hair started to gain popularity because a lot of the 4C girls were like, okay, I know I can't get type 3 hair, so at least I can try to get a type 4A hair texture. And so let me try to do all this different stuff and try to like let my hair weigh itself down or whatever so that I can at least look like I have a 4A hair texture. So then I noticed that even 4A hair was beginning to be pedestalized as the standard for type 4 hair because a lot of the women with the 4C hair texture knew that there was no way they'd ever get to a 3C hair texture. So they were thinking, I can get to 4A. Even if you look at a lot of the things that the women were doing to their hair, even if it was natural, a lot of those things were meant to try to weigh your hair down and try to silken it. So think about the max hydration method. I remember that was really big when I was in college. It was all about like getting your hair to retain moisture, which is good, right? But also the goal is, the reason why you want it to retain moisture is, yes, so it can be healthy, but also you like how it looks better, right? Because you like how it looks shiny or whatever. And whose hair textures are often associated with being shiny? Type 3 hair textures. And so a lot of women were unknowingly still kind of pedestalizing the looser, shinier, silkier, more laid, quote unquote, hair textures. And even to this day, even with the wigs, notice how they do the baby hair still to this day, because they are still trying to get their hairline to look, and their edges and their kitchen or whatever, the back of their head, to look like a woman who has type 3 hair. But then they want to turn around and complain that, oh, you know, type 3 women were getting all the attention, or mixed women were getting all the attention in the natural hair movement. But who's clicking on their videos though? Because you can't tell me that mixed women were elevated during the natural hair movement only by other mixed women. No, there are more people with type 4 hair than there are with type 3 hair in the black community. So it was women in the black community who had the type 4C hair who were still clicking on all of those videos, who were still watching all of those influencers and kind of like admiring their beauty from behind the screen or whatever. So it's not fair to just blame the person who became successful. Blame the people who created texturism, which wasn't that random mixed YouTuber that you want to talk crap about. Why is it that a lot of people, they have so much smoke for MLS women, they have so much smoke for us, but they don't have smoke for the white people who actually created racism or colorism, texturism, and featureism? Why is the smoke always directed towards us? In fact, I've noticed that a lot of these women who used to follow the natural hair movement 10 years ago are now talking about divesting, meaning dating a white man or dating a man outside of your race so you can create babies with different hair textures. Now, if that's not hypocrisy, I don't know what is. And then I noticed there was sort of this uprising of women who felt like they couldn't compete when it came to hair textures. And so then they started becoming almost like these natural hair Nazis, where they would start to say, oh, well, you know what? My hair is more natural than yours. That's why mine looks the way that it does. And yours looks like your edges are laid. That's because you are texlaxing your hair, or you are, putting all this gel in it and stuff. And I'm more natural than you. You know how the women who feel less desirable, they often try to talk crap about women who wear makeup and look pretty, and they'll be like, oh, well, I'm naturally pretty. I don't have to wear red lipstick and high heels in order to be pretty. Well, clearly they're only saying that because they see that you are getting more attention than them. And so in order to make themselves feel more attractive, they have to try to remind themselves that, oh, wait a minute, she only looks prettier than me because she's wearing lipstick and makeup and I'm naturally pretty. So I felt like some of the natural hair Nazis were starting to do that sort of thing. Even for me in college, so I have type 3 hair. My hair is like a looser texture for sure. I would say maybe it's a type 3 at 3B at best. So anyway, when I was in college, I used to wear my hair blow dried. So I didn't actually flat iron it because, it's the natural hair movement days. So flat irons are bad, right? So I used to just straighten it with a blow dryer, and it used to have somewhat of more of a poofy straight look. And I remember people trying to police how I did my hair when I was in college going to an HBCU. I also remember how one time Miss Jessie's was at my college and they gave me free curly hair products over this other girl. And this other girl who was unambiguous, she was like, Exoticals United, she's not even natural. And my hair was natural. I was wearing it in a curly ponytail that day. But she was trying to be a natural hair Nazi and say that no, the natural hair movement was not created for your hair texture. The natural hair movement was created for 4C hair textures, like the kinkiest hair textures of them all. But if that were truly the case, then why are you even using Miss Jessie's? Why are you even using Mixed Chicks? Why are you even using silkeners or these different things that cause your hair texture to look, less tight than it actually is? Just admit that you like looser curl patterns better than, the super tight locked afro hairstyles. Just admit it. Just admit that that's what you like better. And by the way, I'm not shaming anybody for what they like because that's your business. You have the right to create whatever internal beauty standard you feel is the healthiest for you. But it's not fair to project it onto people who just happen to be born with those hair textures and then say, oh, we're replacing you and, we're getting all the free stuff and we're getting all the free products and all the clicks and views. And I'm not getting that because I have 4C hair. Do you see the hypocrisy? I remember one time, so I was wearing my natural hair in its normal poofy straight hairstyle that I used to wear in college. And I had this one friend, she was unambiguous, dark skinned, monoracial, and she wore a weave, like the full weave with the bang and everything. So like her entire hair was covered. And I remember we were both in the bathroom looking in the mirror and I was just fixing my hair. And then I was like, oh, your hair is so cute. And then she was like, oh, thanks. I'm going to wear my real hair soon. I'm just growing it out right now. That's the only reason I have a weave. And I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. And she was like, yeah, my natural hair, it's longer than yours. So she was saying it as if having longer hair is more of a flex, especially if you have longer hair than a quote unquote mixed person with quote unquote good hair. That's how I took it. I remember how in my family having long hair and long silky hair, that was kind of like a competition. Has anyone noticed that? How the natural hair movement, it was almost like who has the longest hair, that sort of competition, or like who has the silkiest hair, who has the waviest hair, who has the prettiest curls. It was never about whose hair is the most natural. Because we all know that the kinkiest of African hair actually grows into more of a lock pattern. So I have family members with 4C hair, and they talk about how when they're washing their hair and putting water on it, it starts to lock up when they're in the shower, just wetting their hair. And how, they have to constantly keep putting water on it and stuff all the time just to get it to not kind of coil within itself. And then they also talk about shrinkage and stuff and how much it shrinks down and how your hair could be down to your butt when it's straightened. But then when it shrinks, because it's a 4C hair texture, it looks like a tiny afro. So notice how in the natural hair movement, it was all about reducing shrinkage because you want your hair to be as long as possible, you want it to look as silky as possible, and you want your edges to look as laid as possible. AKA, you want your hair to look like a stereotypical mixed woman's hair. And that's why when wigs became more affordable in a mixed woman's hair texture, that's why the natural hair movement ended or began to greatly decline. And then I noticed that a lot of women would try to use the excuse that, oh no, this is just a protective style. Meanwhile, they'd be putting these wigs on and then they take them off and they have no more edges. They have traction alopecia because they have been gluing these wigs to their actual hair for months at a time. So do you see the hypocrisy? What do you ladies think? Have you ever had anyone try to police how you wear your hair? Have you ever had others compare their hair to yours, or people try to flex their hair texture on yours? What do you think about the natural movement? Do you think that it declined? Do you feel like the natural hair movement was really just the how to get your hair to look as loose as possible movement, or how to get your hair to look as curly and silky as possible movement? Because that's how I was taking it back then. Let me know what you think in the comments section, and I'll talk to you next time. Stay pretty, ladies.